Um, Happy to talk about anything you want, really.
Yeah, I have a lot of content that I thought I'd discuss with you. So, all right. So,
Good.
first of all, I'd like to start by thanking you for giving the time and opportunity to discuss one of the most important and critical issues that the world doesn't seem to understand or pay attention to most of the time, while they are busy advocating for only women's issues. And I think it's high time in 2023 that we have to acknowledge and take the issues of men very seriously. And I think I hope I use this opportunity to have a very well thorough discussion with you and see where it goes. I
Okay.
hope. Yeah.
Okay. Look forward to it.
Yeah. So I don't want to get into the basic details of what J4MB is about, but I'll just quickly get into the issues that we have in India so that I'll just read out few things and you can tell me how similar the situation is in UK. So the first of the things that I wanted to talk about is so one of the prime reasons that I wanted to interact with you is because India still follows laws that were introduced when they were under the rule of Britain. So this is from 1800s. We have Indian Evidence Act, where the presumption of innocence is only for women. Men are guilty by default. And we have Guardian and Wards Act and maintenance laws, where a wife can make allegations of abuse, live separately without divorce, and claim maintenance, and irrespective of any charges proven against the husband. Even if proved false, there won't be any refund as such. So that's another. And we have marital rape, abortion, which currently the feminists are really fiercely fighting for. Husband and wife has sex, wife gets pregnant, she just loses the mood to carry the child, and she claims that the husband has forced her into the pregnancy, and they'll award her abortion even after the defined legal limit, if I'm getting it right. That is one. And rape on the false pretext of marriage. I actually thought this was a modern invention by Indian women who are continuously whining about how oppressed they are by patriarchy as such. And I could trace it back to something called as Seduction of Crime by John Charlton, if I'm right. This was the propositions for rape on the false pretext of marriage has its roots over there. So
Okay. So it would be considered rape if I think you're saying it considered rape if the woman had sex in the expectation or the promise that she would marry that man. Right.
yep.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a Victorian British law.
So yeah, that's one. And we have men who are made responsible for kids that are not their own. And even if the man uses the paternity test or DNA test as evidence, he still has to pay. Majority of the women get away with false accusations and committing perjury, but still getting rewarded in the guise of financial security to weaker section. That is one. There was a case actually where a woman alleged domestic violence by the husband. The guy fought for 6 years, and the court understood that the woman lied. But at the end of it, what did the court do? They fined the woman £5 and they just let her go. That's all. No one cared about the mental agony that the husband would have gone through, nor was there any acknowledgement as such. That is one. Men cannot obtain phone records of his wife to prove that she has committed adultery because it breaches her right to privacy. But a woman can can claim the phone records of the husband to prove that he has committed adultery, and that could be the grounds for domestic violence, rape, and then she's liable for maintenance, alimony, and all the kinds of support. So yeah, how similar are these situations?
Well, I think we'll obviously need to go through them one by one. It seems generally that I mean, I always make the distinction between what legislation says, and how the courts actually act. There's in the UK at least, there's very little. There's not much in the way of gendered laws, but it's how the criminal justice system deals with these things. So for one obvious example of that is in genital mutilation.
Correct.
Okay, we refer to male circumcision as, or circumcision as, male genital mutilation. Now, both female and male genital mutilation have been crimes in the UK since at least 1861, because they're inflicting bodily harm without consent, and a baby or a child can't give informed consent, obviously. But no prosecutions were ever brought under that. And then in the 1980s, we had the introduction of female genital mutilation acts.
Okay.
And there have been a few court cases over it. So just recently, an African woman who took a young girl to I think it was Kenya, I could be wrong, but somewhere in Africa, for the girl to be circumcised. She was convicted. But you know, we tried for some years. We had male genital mutilation as our #1 campaigning issue, and it was just so frustrating. I tried to take out a private prosecution of a doctor over it, and a judge wouldn't allow me to do that. It's appalling. But I mean, if you want to run down that list very quickly, Vasanth, then I'll be happy to sort of give you some ideas on it. One of the things that always stuns me is, I think I'm right in saying that a husband cannot have his wife charged with domestic violence.
Correct.
Absolutely incredible. It blows my mind. It really does. I mean, that isn't the case in the UK, although of course far more women bring prosecutions against men than vice versa, although the number of victims are similar.
Interesting that you brought up male genital mutilation quite early, because I've had a section that I wanted to discuss with you, because my first red pill moment about male genital mutilation was, there was a I used to watch. See, are you religious? Is that, if I may ask?
No.
Okay, then fine. We are on the same page. So I've had my awakening following the Four Horsemen: Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, and Sam Harris. So while watching one of the debates of Christopher Hitchens with the rabbi says that his son cried more at his first haircut than he did at his circumcision. The audience laughs after what Rabbi said. Hitchens claps back, saying that the fact that you could say this about the genital mutilation of baby boys and think that it is a fit subject for humor actually proves my point, how religion makes sane people do and say bad things. That was the first introduction for me about how the discrimination against baby boys goes.
It's very frustrating. I mean, we in the UK have far more Muslims. I think probably 10 times more Muslims than we do Jews. So when I was campaigning at Speaker's Corner, I'd speak to a lot more Muslims than Jewish people, and they were quite different. And the Jews were in the main happy to acknowledge that MGM was harmful, very harmful, but they would always say the same thing, that it's in the Torah, it's in, or what Christians would call the Old Testament, and it was a covenant with God, and that was end of discussion. Really, there's nothing more to be said. But Muslims always talked about hygiene. There was a huge hygiene thing, and you know, I'm not quite sure what it was. It's just impossible, isn't it, to argue with a religious person?
I've studied in a college which is a Muslim majority college. It was called Mufakamja College. It's in Hyderabad, in south of the states of India. So one of our classmates ended up as a terrorist just a few years ago.
Wow. It is awful. I mean, I get that religion is a big comfort to lots of people, and I think if certain things happen in my life, let's say if my daughter's died, I can see myself, I can see myself becoming religious in an attempt to cope with it. But you're right, it does lead some good people to do horrible things. And
Reminds me of Stephen Weinberg's quote where he says, with or without religion, good people can behave well and bad people can do evil. But for good people to do evil, that takes religion.
It does, sadly, it does. So no, so your position on your legal position on domestic violence is really shocking. Just that I tell people my understanding of it, and they can't believe that could possibly be the case. So I guess you were talking about the Victorian era, I think mainly. So I guess the laws would have been similar back then, but then British law has moved on since, and it seems that yours is still stuck in this just ridiculous state.
They haven't repealed the major sections which would actually hold a woman responsible. They will never. The amount of feminization of laws, policies, the workplace rules, the amount at which the pace with which it is happening in India currently is absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I still remember the first time that I got around the Declaration of Sentiments. And then it says history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries and usurpation. You know it better than me. And I found out that it's just a ripoff of Declaration of Independence. They just used a certain set of words.
Oh, same style. Okay, and it was also signed. It was signed by the women there, but also by 25 men.
Correct. I remember.
It's I mean that's so often men play a major role in this madness.
They always needed men to enforce all these things.
Yeah,
but they will never admit it. They will never admit it. So
Paul Elam has this saying that one measure of a man's mental health is his ability to say no to women.
I've seen that he just recently tweeted as well.
yeah. I think that's absolutely true. If I could just give a plug for next year's conference in Budapest, that's the Parliament building behind me there. So that'll be the 10th anniversary of the first one, which was held in Detroit, which Paul hosted.
I've seen it.
He's going to be talking about why men shouldn't marry, which is a subject he's very dear to his heart.
I've seen the interaction the video that you posted of you, Janice, and
okay, yeah.
I'm trying to keep myself as much updated as possible so that I really want you to know that this is something that I'm taking very seriously, and make sure that we don't waste time, this is very precious time. So I just want to make sure that we get it across right away. What I found very disturbing was in my research that somewhere someone is actually building all these people. They are pumping all these people from a certain place. And then I found out that it's the Women's Studies Department. So
they're infiltrating organizations. Is that what you're saying?
So they established the Women's Studies around 1969-70, if I'm right. And also it happened around the same time in India as well, where they started establishing that the patriarchy is the villain, that the women's freedom, in order to achieve that, you have to destroy patriarchy, capitalism, whatever.
And the family.
And the family, of course. How did I forget? I think they were just pissed. I'm sorry if I can use that word. They're just angry that many of the women found comfort in household chores. These set of feminists, they couldn't digest the fact that many women were really happy in just taking care of the family, husband, kids, and they had a peaceful life. No, they were not.
Well, I mean, feminists are very untypical women, aren't they? They're strange. They're just like the worst, the worst bloody women in the world. Feminists. I loathe them. I mean, the extraordinary thing is the amount of power that they wield for their numbers.
Yeah.
And we have a charity called the Fawcett Society in the UK, which goes back to like 1860 or something.
Okay.
And they commissioned a survey 3 or 4 years ago now, I think, which discovered that only 9% of British women self-identify as feminists and only 4% of British men.
I remember.
I can't believe they published that. It's absolutely insane. But I mean, being the geniuses that they were, they had to account for it somehow. So they said, that Britain was a nation of hidden feminists, because people will say that they believe in gender equality, so they must be feminists. It's just like, you have to have mental health issues to do that, to
It,
do that gymnastics.
it was never about equality. That's because they
No.
always claim that women couldn't vote and all that, but so were men. I found out that only 3% of men could vote until 1832, if I'm right. I think it was from
Right.
universal suffrage in UK. So many men couldn't even vote. They say that women couldn't own property or go
It's
to.
just not. It's absolute nonsense.
No.
Janice Fiamengo, who's going to be the keynote speaker in Budapest, has done a big history about it. It's just everything that people believe is just absolute nonsense.
They also keep talking about how women were treated harshly and they were held as sex slaves and properties and as such, but no one talks about how even men were held as properties and sex slaves in ancient Greece.
Yes.
Talks about how men were forced to marry, even the medieval knights, and also about the forced paternity, regulation of man's sexuality, honor killings, and most importantly, how women can incite violence against other men.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this. That is
Just going back to the voting issue. I mean, most of the men who died or were injured in World War II, the British men who died or injured in World War I, didn't have the vote.
correct. Correct.
Something like 3/4 of them didn't have the vote. And I mean, countless men died in the struggle for the vote. Not one woman died in the women's struggle for the vote. There was that crazy woman who jumped in front of a horse, but she was clinically insane. She once attacked a clergyman on a train platform, thinking he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Apparently,
Okay.
looked nothing like him. She was insane.
There was also white feather movement where
Uh,
they used to shame the people who wouldn't subscribe for going for the
But
beach.
any men who they judged to be of fighting age, and some of them were only boys, and they would have to. They were 14 or something, and they would lie so as to be, conscripted.
This is bonkers. This is bonkers. And also, I found out the feminists um, getting away with. I mean, most of the women getting away with the murder of infants back in the 19th century.
Right. Well, I don't know about the situation in India, Vasanth, but in the UK, well, let's make it a sort of slightly wider lens. I would like to put at the door of feminism abortion. The World Health Organization estimates there are 73 million abortions every year. 73 million. It is a genocide on a scale unknown in human history. And in the UK, at least, women are very rarely. So apart from killing 73 million unborn children, women in the UK, at least, are very rarely prosecuted for killing infants. So under 12 months, very rare.
There was also an interesting case that Janice has pointed out. This was Hester Vaughan, if I believe, if I'm right, Hester Vaughan. There was a lady who had killed her 1 week baby child, and she was prosecuted. And but the important thing was the people who came, who did a defense campaign for her. This included Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony.
Okay, right.
These were the people who were advocating for her, continued to run a campaign stating that, oh, she's a woman, she would have done it out of fit of rage. She really didn't mean any harm. The kid has been beaten to
Yeah,
smithereens.
yeah. And the double standard in this area really is one of the most extreme of which I'm aware. So women can and do kill infant. I mean, mothers kill far more children than fathers. Um, a woman in the UK, if she kills her infant, can know that she's very unlikely to be prosecuted. So if you look at what happens to a man when he tries to kill an infant, we had a case some years back where um, it seems that this woman gave birth, and her boyfriend, the father, allegedly tried to kill the infant by putting his epilepsy drugs into the milk, in the fridge. The child went a bit dizzy apparently for a time, but it didn't suffer any lasting damage as far as is known. So whereas if she had killed that infant, she would have not even been prosecuted. He was prosecuted and sentenced to 25 years.
Yep.
And what difference is there? Would there be? It's just purely gender, purely sex.
There was also a case, the recent one, Lucy Letby, if I'm right.
Yes. Oh, the nurse.
Yes.
The people, the whistleblowers, the doctors who were raising concerns had to handwrite a letter apologizing to her.
Yes.
It is. I actually wrote to Julie Bindel saying that I look forward to her article on that case. But no man would have got away with that series of killings of babies.
There are still people who are actually running a defense campaign for Lucy Letby at the moment. This exactly echoed the Hester Vaughan's defense from the suffragettes, the first wave suffragettes, which is really, because all I can see is these are the patterns that no one seems to actually notice, or I don't know why people are so afraid to talk against women in the cases, because I think people are actually afraid. Why do you think?
I think very much so. I'm always quite surprised when I'm interviewed by someone quite young like yourself, because there's a reason why most of us are retired, because we then don't have concerns over employment. But it's quite shocking. I mean, it's a poor, people's livelihoods taken away. It's ghastly. I mean, people are right to be afraid, but we still don't. I mean, we launched as a political party in 2013, and we were going as a party for 10 years. It was only earlier this year that we deregistered.
April, I believe it.
Yeah, but for that time, we were the only political party in the English-speaking world advocating for the human rights of men and boys. The only one. And now there's not one. We had in 2016 in the London conference, we had Philip Davis MP speak, and he's going to be speaking in Budapest along with his wife, Esther McVeigh, who's also an MP. He was for quite some years the only elected politician in the English-speaking world to ever stand up for men and boys. It's really astonishing.
And I've seen how people like Jess Phillips reacts whenever there is a talk.
Well, she very nearly stopped, as you probably know, the first International Men's Day debate, and she said to him, "You can have your debate when I'm happy with the gender balance in this place." The arrogance, it's and she nearly got away with it.
Attitude. No matter how many statistics you bring forward and show them that there are genuine cases for men and there are separate issues that doesn't bother women, but at the same time we have to acknowledge it, they shoot away with dismissive attitude right away.
Yeah, well, they simply don't care, Vasanth. I mean, it's all down to the empathy gap. Oh, you got it. Wonderful. So this is a book I published for William Collins.
Yeah, the illustrated gap, the blog he maintains.
Yeah, it's the illustrated empathy gap. It's just the best.
Yeah,
he must be about the most brilliant man in the men's rights movement. I think is quite incredible, and he speaks at our conferences. It's quite expensive as a paperback, but the ebook is very cheap. It's under £5 anyway.
I remember you mentioned it on the Pearls episode. Yeah.
But that's to go back to your point. It doesn't matter.
They don't.
Facts do not matter in this, and that's the biggest frustration. Like, where do you go from there? You have in the absence of empathy, well, you get exactly what we have, don't you? This absolute madness. Increasingly dysfunctional societies.
This is bonkers. This is bonkers, because since we were talking about maternal infanticide and all that. I also noticed that whenever a woman sexually assaults a minor or rapes, exactly, the newspapers commonly report that she had sex.
Yes.
They never report it as, that she has raped him in the first
Well,
place.
yes. Again, forgive me, I can only really talk about the British situation, Vasanth, but the Sexual Offences Act, I mean, like all this legislation, was influenced very heavily by feminists, and the crime of rape can only be performed with a penis.
Same here.
So they instantly stopped women being able to,
and rape.
Yeah.
This is absolutely very worrying. And whenever there is a definition, or whenever there's a topic that's brought up, something like, if a woman forces a man for sex, can it be considered rape? They will never accept that.
Well, there's the crime. I'm trying to think what to describe, but being forced to penetrate.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is far more common than is. I mean, male rape of women is far less common than people believe, and female sexual abuse, should we say, of men is far more common.
Correct.
But there's certainly in the UK, nobody does surveys on that, but the American Centers for Disease Control do, and they show a really quite astonishing amounts of women sexually abusing men.
It's because at first I thought, I should be very honest, that when I was young, and I used to think that women have been oppressed. I was still, I should say, just for the conversation's sake, I was still a blue pill guy. I wasn't aware of the issues of the men because we were never made available to get exposure about the issues of men. It's always been about women. So it became difficult to cross that and then rearrange our understanding about the structure and go forward. What do you think?
Which brings me to the subject of the mainstream media. It's I still shake my head in disbelief at how little truth there is. I mean, I don't think I've there's so little on things like domestic violence. We have a weekly magazine or newspaper here called The Spectator, which is right of centre on pretty well everything, except for anything to do with gender politics. So Julie Bindel, probably one of the most famous feminist journalists in the world, has had 50 articles published by The Spectator, 50, and her only interest is in male violence against women. She has no interest in female violence against women, funnily enough. And although it's long been known that the most violent relationships are lesbian relationships. But so I went to the Spectator, the same paper, because I wanted a one-page advert about domestic violence in one weekly issue. It would have cost about £7,000. I was going to do a crowdfunder for it. The female feminist editor of The Spectator in London refused point blank to publish it or explain why she wasn't going to publish it. I was just told no. So there is just no anti-feminist. I mean, I mean, there's a few writers, columnists and so on, who will sometimes make fun of feminists, but it's very insubstantial.
This actually brings a good point about how, of course, the legendary Erin Pizzey was the first person who introduced the domestic shelter, the first one in the world in the UK, and the feminists ensured that she's kicked out of that. Well,
she had to leave the country in the end, and her dog was shot, and she had her life threatened. But she's still giving the odd interview. She's over 80 now, and she's wheelchair bound. She's not well, but she's still doing the odd interview.
I'm following her content as well. Yes. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I have a point which I thought I would like to ask, if that's okay. So in your book, Feminism, The Ugly Truth, in one of your chapters, you mentioned that public are not aware
No,
of.
I've never understood why people object to the cover. I
I love
just
it. It's absolutely beautiful. I love it. I'm telling you, because the first time that I took a look at the cover image, and I was blown away because it just perfectly captures the essence of what feminism is about.
yeah, female and evil. I mean, and what better than a vampire?
And these people have the audacity to misconstrue the image and tell that these are the misunderstood witches.
Mm,
No, these people are downright evil right from their very
yeah,
origins.
they are. They are.
They are. So yeah, going back to the question I was trying to ask, in your book, in one of your chapters, you mentioned that public are not aware of misandry. They won't find what they are not looking for. So in
Yeah, I mean, but
yeah.
I think misandry. It's funny. I've known plenty of men who've had their lives ruined
Mhm.
by women,
Yeah.
false rape allegations, you
Johnny,
name it.
yep, yep,
And yet even those men are not misandrous.
correct.
I can't think offhand of anybody I know who would reasonably. I don't think men are capable of it. Actually, I don't think 99.9% of men are incapable of hating women as a class. Whereas I think women kind of are hardwired to be well to be anxious about men and therefore to hate them. Which of course, I mean, feminists are the only group in the world actively trying to raise women's anxiety. Everyone else is trying to reduce it.
In the name of consciousness raising.
Well, yeah, it's probably but yeah, I do speak to women who really believe there's a rape culture. It's incredible. There's a false rape allegation culture. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
Because it's it very seldom gets um so I mean women are so seldom prosecuted for it. But William Collins in the empathy gap estimates that 77% of the
Rape
allegations
accusations.
made to the police are false.
Yes, the
And
same thing.
that's
Same
yeah,
thing in India. There's
yeah,
no doubt absolutely about it. Because I just look at what happened to Andrew Malkinson, if I'm right,
yes.
who spent
Oh,
10 years,
yeah.
right,
17 years in prison.
for
Uh,
a crime that he did not commit at all.
yeah, and it would have been something like 10 years, I think, if he'd admitted his guilt. So, I mean, it's an appalling piece of legislation that people have to admit guilt, because then it looks like he was guilty. But no,
And,
he just didn't want to spend another 7 years behind bars. It's madness.
and the feminists have the audacity to say that women don't lie about rape. But look at what happened to Jonathan Hawker, if I believe it's right, the male teacher who was sacked for sexual assault. He's a male teacher in an all-female school. I think this is in UK, I guess.
Right.
So the students thought it would be fun to just accuse him of
Oh,
sexual.
sorry. Yes, this case. Yes, they admitted they thought it'd be fun to have him fired. Yeah, it's quite shocking. You often read in the papers, at least here, that the false accusation rate is known to be very low, and people will quote a report by Alison Levitt, who's a barrister, and basically what that report did was to present the fact that prosecutions are rare as meaning that the offences were rare. Because but the two things are completely different, of course. And yeah, again, it goes back to facts just don't matter.
I think they're just willfully blind to male issues.
Well, it's a lack of empathy, isn't it? Because they don't care. We're just not on their radar.
I think they just want to make a. I think it could be also something rooted. It could be also something rooted in something called as male chivalry. Like they just
Right.
make sure that women and children are prioritized always, and they are given the upper hand.
No, men are subhuman as far as they're concerned. There's no question about that.
And also there was obviously the Spanish football coach who was forced to just, the situation. That's one. And then
Luis Rubiales.
Yes, yeah. And these people were just having fun in the room right after the kiss event. And now the lady has flipped the narrative and she has portrayed herself as the victim of male sexual aggression.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. There was also a Yale student who was Saifullah Khan, who was accused of a date rape, I guess.
Right.
And then he was thrown away from the university, was cut off from all the scholarships.
Right.
And I think he's suing the campus for about, I don't know the amount. It's for a large amount that he's suing the university back.
Well, there was an EU summit recently, European Union summit, where the who was it? I think it was the Croatian foreign minister. They were having a big photo lineup, and the Croatian foreign minister leaned over to kiss the German chancellor, and she sort of had a face of, just horror. So I expect he'll be gone soon. But you wonder what next is shaking hands with a woman. It's all about treating women as gods, isn't it? That we shouldn't even touch.
How can we forget the charlatan Proudman?
Charlotte Proudman. Oh my God.
No, I intentionally wanted to say that she is a charlatan for sure. She's one
charlatan.
Yeah. The infamous LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
That is one. And there was also this person by name Anthony Broadwater. There's this author by name Alice Sebold. She's the author of Lucky and Lovely Bones. So this lady has alleged that when she was a teenager, that there was a stranger who raped her apparently in darkest street corners. And when she was asked to the police station and identify the person, she identified a wrong person. And this person has spent around 19 years in jail.
Wow. Like where's this?
This is in America, if I believe it to be.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So he was arrested in around 1984. He was released in 1999, and he was made to register as a sex offender. And then in 2021, he was acquitted, where his name was cleared, and all Alice did was she said she's sorry. And that's, they have absolutely no sense of personal responsibility.
No, in the UK at least, the women in these cases have lifelong anonymity. But as soon as a man is charged, his name's out there in the media. I mean that's one of our many areas. That men should have anonymity until they're convicted. Not prosecuted. I mean, because they're still innocent at that point. But it's really quite shocking. It's quite likely that we'll have a Labour government in maybe 12 months, 14 months time, and I am pretty sure that we'll see the introduction of juryless rape trials. The Scottish government, which is very left wing, wanted to introduce it, but the barristers in Scotland refused to do a pilot or to go along with the scheme. But I can see Keir Starmer, who's probably going to be our next prime minister, introducing it. And it's always noticeable in prime minister's question times when the opposition leader and the prime minister face each other. I don't think I've seen an example where he's not surrounded by women. There's no men. There's like 6 or 7 people in the frame. Always women. Always at least 2 black or minority ethnic. Not one man in sight apart from Starmer himself. Appalling, man.
This is crazy. The reason why I mentioned about what you mentioned in your book, The Public Are Not Aware of Misandry, I wanted to ask, ever since the establishment of justice for men and boys, how successful do you think J4MB has been in representing and bringing out the awareness about feminist lies. In other words, I wanted to just ask, how would you rate it on a performance scale over the past decade on how successful it has been?
That's a very good question. It's a very good one because I don't have a good answer for it. I don't know. I mean, we are well known. I mean, anybody who takes an interest in gender politics in the UK, and I think internationally as well, if they have an interest, then they tend to know of us. So I've got, for example, I've had a Wikipedia page for some years, started by a woman called the Vintage Feminist, and I think it's a positive thing. I mean, there are things like links to our website and all this kind of stuff, so it all helps. But there's also some absolute nonsense on there. They have this policy about who they consider a reliable source of information, and so they'll say, this always makes me laugh, the Guardian, which is super left wing. Just but there's a few others like the Times of London and so on. So when they edit, or I try and have something put on there, if it's not reported in these newspapers, then they won't print it. But if there's an attack on us, I mean, we've like from student websites when I had milkshake thrown over me, they were happy to provide links to like left-wing student websites. So I would ask, how is this? You just have a completely different standard for for feminists and anti-feminists. And if you look at the Wikipedia page on men's rights movements, it just doesn't. It's completely written by feminists. It's just absolute nonsense.
If we do a quick Google search about anti-feminism humor, nothing will turn up.
Why did you mention humor particularly?
Because I just wanted to talk about, I just wanted to experiment and see if there is any feminist humor. There is, that can just take it at men's issues and ridicule men and make them look like jokers in front of everyone. But I just wanted to see if there was any links that would turn up. And
well, I've been running for I think a couple of years now, laughingatfeminists.com.
The Lying Feminist Awards, obviously.
The Lying Feminist of the Month Awards, the Gormless and the Toxic.
Your favorite?
Yeah, I see a lot of humor in it, and laughingatfeminist.com.
Your personal favorite, Laura Bates, of course.
Oh God, Laura Bates, Laura Bloody Bates. I think she's now 37. I first met her about 10 or 11 years ago.
Great show.
Oh, she's basically a child, a nervous child in a 37-year-old woman's body. That's and it's actually tragic for her, but it's tragic for everyone else. But she's hugely appealing to anxious young women, because she's kind of telling them that you don't need to become resilient. The world has to change so that you're So we get Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying that he wants a world where his daughters feel safe on the street. That will never happen. I mean, if there was one murder of a woman in 10 years, women would still be anxious. They're anxious creatures.
Yep. There's also this part where you mentioned that because feminism has never exposed itself for public debate, the general public failed to see the intended political strategy. Because of this heavy censorship, people have been denied the knowledge and the political insight to see what feminism has become. So my question here is, has your position about feminism been challenged in a way that made you rethink your view about it? Or has it been consistently getting stronger about how bad feminism is?
Oh, I think the longer you study it, the more evil you recognize it as, to be honest. Yeah, with each year, it's just that much more evident to me. And the fact that people you know, I mean, the message is getting out there. I mean, 10 years ago, more women, prominent women, were happy to call themselves feminists, and today they tend to avoid it. Interestingly enough, I mean, the same stuff goes on, but they just don't sort of identify it with feminism and feminists.
Do you ever think that they had good intentions at any point of time?
No, absolutely not. No. You mentioned the Declaration of Sentiments. Was it 1850? I think, was it somewhere?
Somewhere around.
I always forget the exact date, but around there, at Seneca Falls in New York State.
1840, 1847.
1848 was it? Oh, okay. Okay. No, I mean it was all built on lies. I mean, something you hear quite often is that it was good to start with, but then it's got corrupted at some point. No, it was corrupt right from day one.
From the day one, yes.
I mean, back in the French Revolution, they guillotined a number of feminists. I understand. That's the way to do it.
You must be aware of this British actor Greg Ellis, who's the author of The Respondent.
Yes, of course. Yes, we interviewed him. Yeah, an amazing book, and an amazing story, actually. Yeah.
I have. So, in an interview with him, Erin Pizzi was talking about while feminists were busy networking and building consciousness-raising groups, she pointed out that men do not know how to look after each other emotionally.
No, the idea that men want to oppress women and do so is so batshit insane. I mean, men are not capable of defending themselves against women. I mean, perhaps there was some evolutionary point to that, long ago in our species, because I think more of this is like in the men's hard wiring. This lack of interest, in the general public of men's rights. I mean, sometimes when I was at Speaker's Corner, and you could tell that the man wasn't interested. I'd say, are you not interested in men's rights? And they would say, no, just not, And you could say, well, I can list 20 areas where your human rights or your boys' human rights are assaulted, and there's none. There isn't one in Britain today that affects women negatively. Just not interested. It's amazing.
So I just want to go back to the previous question that I asked when I was asking about how do you rate the performance of J4MB. Just to add to that, I think we've discussed around 15-20 issues so far. So amongst these, let's say 15-20, let's say, for example, out of this 15-20, what issues do you think J4MB has been successful at raising raising awareness in the public?
I think probably male genital mutilation, which was our focus for probably 5 or 6 years. Like I can run down just very quickly, Vasanth.
Yes.
If anyone wants to know what we think about these things, the best place to go is our manifesto, which we still have on our website.
Okay.
So the issues we cover: marriage and divorce. There's a lot to be said about that, as you know. Children's access to parents following family breakdowns and fatherlessness. Denying fathers access to their kids is the cruelest thing imaginable. Reproductive rights, men don't have them. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. This is something that people don't often talk about, but it's an example of women's lack of accountability. This is where a woman drinks alcohol during pregnancy, and it's the #1 cause of avoidable mental health incapacitation in the Western world.
I've personally known people who've done that.
Oh my God! And in the UK, it's not a crime. A woman can drink herself into a stupor every night and it's not a crime. So then she walks away and this baby with half the size head, and it makes me so mad. Genital mutilation we've touched on. We touched on abortion. Children's brain damage from contact sports. In the UK,
compulsory sports, you mean?
This is a soccer and rugby.
Okay.
Where children's brains are damaged. by concussion, and but it's only boys.
Okay.
Education, employment, domestic violence, paternity fraud, sexual abuse, armed forces veterans' mental health issues, the criminal justice system, homelessness, suicide, the lack of anonymity for suspected sexual offenders, healthcare provision, political representation. I mean, 80 pages. And not one feminist I've ever met can come up with one intelligent with one area where women and girls are
Unfairly disadvantaged.
unfairly treated in Britain today. They can't, and I suspect that's true across the Western world. And with you, yeah.
And also, most of the people outside India have this misconception that marriage rate is high in India because the divorce rates are just 1%.
Very low, yeah.
That's the divorce rates are 1%. That's because many people have been fighting for the divorces for almost 10 to 15 years.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Many people outside India have this misconception that India is the best place to, is the best place to look up to when it comes to marriages. No, it's even more effed up.
Right.
Effed up. So the one thing I want to check with you is how much improvement do you see in men rescuing other men who are victims of female perpetrated violence?
You're talking about in the home now, Vasanth?
In UK as such, like how?
Sorry, but I mean at home, so you're talking about couples,
domestic violence.
Okay, yeah, I think that one of the main problems there is men not recognizing they're the victims of it. You know, they'll rationalize it as they have done something to upset the woman, and the woman there had a reason to attack them. I mean, that's how typically it happens. But we know from the Partner Abuse State of Knowledge project, what was it, 2013, that in straight couples, in about 60% of straight couples where there's violence,
it's bidirectional.
It's bidirectional, right? So sometimes the woman strikes the first blow, so to speak, and sometimes the man. But in the 40% of cases where it's always the same partner, it's twice as likely to be the woman as the man. Twice as likely.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So just to end with, are there any books that you would like to suggest for people who are actually trying to get into the space and understand men's issues? What would be your top 5 to 10 books that you would immediately recommend?
Gosh, right. Well, obviously, this international bestseller.
Yes, of course. Yep. I do.
William Collins's The Empathy Gap.
Yep.
There's a book that's it was written in let me think about 1971, give or take a year or two, and Amazon pulled it on the 50th anniversary.
Okay.
And that was a book by a German Argentinian woman called Esther Vilar.
Okay.
And it's called The Manipulated Man.
Oh, yes.
It is just amazing. I don't know any other book quite like it. It's also laugh out loud funny at times.
Okay.
It's absolutely brilliant. So that would be among them. Paul Elam's book, Men, Women, Relationships. Janice Fiamengo has done it. And I mean, Janice is extraordinary. So she's going to be the keynote speaker in Budapest. The Boy Crisis is a pretty amazing piece of work.
Warren Farrell.
By Warren Farrell. But he doesn't. There's not so much as one sentence about how the feminists created the boy crisis. And I suspect that's down to his editor, because it was published by the same idiots who published Laura Bates's books. So pretty corrupted by feminists, I think we could say.
Okay. This I think we have Roy Baumeister, and then Alice Eagley, Stephen Baskerville, Steve Moxon's The Woman Racket.
Yes. Now, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, The Woman Racket, 2005. 2008, I think.
2005, 8, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was one of the books which red pilled me. It's a sensational book. I'm just trying to find. After my second divorce, I wrote The Fraud. There's a book by trying to think of the guy's name now, Dick Masterson, which I don't think is his real name, but it's called Men Are Better Than Women.
Oh.
And it's just so funny. It is because there's so much truth in it. You know, that's there's a reason that anti-feminists are funny and feminists aren't.
That's right.
Oh, sorry. Let me.
Yeah.
And a book by a guy called Herbert Purdy called Their Angry Creed.
Oh.
Which is like a history of feminism. It's the best one I'm personally aware of.
Okay. Noted. Well, I think we've reached the end of the session, and
Yep.
and I hope that I've made good use of the time that you've given me, and I hope that we have more conversations in the future.
Agreed.
And I would love to interact as and when it's possible. And I hope to see a good day when men's issues are fairly accepted by the society. So cheers.
Yes. Well, you're probably young enough to you might see it. I very much doubt I will. But, thanks, Vasanth. It's been very interesting.
Thank you so much.
Okay.